A mafia boss's son screamed in agony every single day for 8 months. Dozens of doctors found nothing wrong. But when a desperate housemaid washed his hair and felt something metallic beneath his skin, she uncovered a conspiracy more horrifying than anyone imagined. They weren't just watching the boy, they'd turned him into a living surveillance weapon. And the only way to save him would cost everything. Before we dive into this terrifying thriller about surveillance, betrayal, and a mother's courage, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story goes places you won't expect, with twists that will leave you speechless. You definitely don't want to miss what happens when a simple housemaid becomes the only person who can save a child from a nightmare. Now, let me introduce you to the people caught in this deadly conspiracy. The Sampson estate looked like a fortress. 20-foot walls topped with cameras, armed guards at every entrance, security protocols that would make a military base jealous. But all that protection couldn't stop the enemy already inside. Hazel Dennis stood at the service entrance, her hands trembling as she clutched the employment contract offering more money than she'd made in the past 6 months combined. She needed this job desperately. Emma's medical bills were crushing her, and the charity hospital was running out of patients. Sister Grace had recommended her for this position, though the elderly nun had been vague about the details. "The family needs someone with a gentle touch," she'd said. "Someone who cares about children. Can you do that?" Hazel. Of course she could. Hazel had spent 7 years caring for Emma through surgeries, treatments, and endless hospital stays. She knew how to be gentle with suffering children. What she didn't know was that the child in this mansion was suffering from something far worse than illness. Vincent Calabrese, the head of security, escorted her through corridors that felt more like a museum than a home. Marble floors, expensive art, the kind of wealth Hazel couldn't even conceptualize. He explained the rules. Minimal contact with Mr. Sampson, absolute discretion about everything she saw or heard, and her primary responsibility was caring for young Andrew. "The boy has medical issues," Vincent said carefully. "Severe headaches, daily. The previous caregivers couldn't handle it." "How many previous caregivers?" Hazel asked. 7, in 8 months. That should have been her first warning. She met Andrew that evening. He sat in an enormous bedroom filled with books and astronomy posters. His young face drawn with pain, dark circles under his eyes suggesting weeks of poor sleep. "Hello," Hazel said gently. "I'm Hazel. I'm going to be helping take care of you." Andrew looked up, and Hazel's heart broke. This was a child in agony, not the dramatic pain of a tantrum, but the exhausted suffering of someone who'd endured too much for too long. "Are you going to leave too?" he asked quietly. "Like the others?" "Not if I can help it," Hazel promised. She had no idea that promise would nearly cost her life. That first week, Hazel witnessed Andrew's daily torment. The headaches came without warning, sudden, devastating pain that left him screaming, clutching his head, sometimes collapsing. They lasted anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours. Afterward, he'd be exhausted, barely able to speak. "The doctors say there's nothing wrong," Andrew told her between episodes. "They've done so many tests. Dad's taken me everywhere, but they can't find anything." What would you do if a child was suffering and every expert said nothing was wrong? Would you trust the professionals or your own instincts? Hazel watched Andrew carefully, her years of caring for Emma having taught her to notice small details doctors sometimes missed. She observed that the headaches seemed to come after certain activities, after tutoring sessions with Theodore, after time in the library, after being in specific rooms of the mansion. And she noticed something else: perfect circular bruises across his scalp. hidden beneath his thick, dark hair. 8 of them, arranged in a precise pattern. On her 3rd day during Andrew's evening bath, Hazel saw her chance to investigate. As she helped him wash his hair, one of the few times he allowed anyone to touch his head, her fingers gently explored the bruised areas. "Does this hurt?" she asked, barely touching one circular mark. Andrew's scream was immediate, violent, and unlike anything Hazel had ever heard. He jerked away so hard he nearly drowned in the bathwater, his entire body convulsing as if electrocuted. Hazel pulled him out, wrapping him in towels, her hands shaking. But she'd felt something in that moment of contact. Something small, hard, and decidedly unnatural beneath his skin. Something metallic. And in that instant, Hazel Dennis realized that Andrew's suffering wasn't medical. It was intentional. Someone had put something in this child's skull, and she was the first person to figure it out. The scream shattered the evening quiet like glass. Hazel's hands jerked away from Andrew's head, bathwater sloshing over the tub's edge as the boy convulsed with agony that seemed to come from his very soul. His eyes rolled back, his small body rigid with pain so intense he couldn't even draw breath to scream again. "Andrew!" Hazel grabbed him, pulling him against her, ignoring the water soaking her clothes. "Andrew, breathe. Please, sweetheart, breathe." The bathroom door burst open. Vincent Calabrese appeared, weapon drawn, his face cycling through tactical assessment and genuine fear. "What happened?" "I don't know. I just touched his head and..." Another scream. This one weaker but somehow worse, because Andrew was crying now, tears mixing with bathwater, his hands clutching his skull like he was trying to hold it together. "Get Mr. Sampson," Hazel commanded, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. Now, something is very wrong. Vincent hesitated. Mafia enforcers didn't take orders from housemaids, but Andrew's agonized whimpering made the decision for him. He spoke rapidly into his radio while Hazel wrapped the boy in towels, her mind racing. In that moment before Andrew screamed, her fingers had touched something beneath his skin. Something small, hard, and angular. Something that absolutely shouldn't be inside a child's skull. What would you do if you discovered something impossible? Something that every instinct said was wrong, but that no one else had noticed? Ron Sampson arrived in under 3 minutes, which told Hazel everything about how seriously Vincent had conveyed the situation. The Mafia boss filled the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, expensive suit, slightly disheveled, his face a mask of controlled fear that probably terrified his enemies, but right now just looked like a father's desperation. "What happened?" His voice was deadly calm. "I was washing his hair," Hazel said, still holding Andrew, who'd gone limp with exhaustion. "I touched one of the bruises on his scalp, barely touched it, and he reacted like I'd electrocuted him." "The bruises?" Ron moved closer, his attention laser-focused. "Here." Hazel carefully turned Andrew's head, parting his wet hair to reveal the perfect circular marks. 8 of them, too precise to be accidental. And underneath, she met Ron's eyes. "There's something under his skin, something that shouldn't be there." Ron went absolutely still. Then, "Vincent, get Dr. Cox here, immediately. Tell him to bring his portable scanner. Boss, it's midnight. I don't care if it's Christmas morning. Get him here." The cold fury in Ron's voice made Vincent move instantly. Ron knelt beside Hazel and Andrew, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he examined his son's scalp. "Andrew, can you hear me?" "It hurts, Dad," Andrew whispered. "It hurts so much." "I know, son. I know. Ron's jaw clenched. But we're going to figure out what's wrong, I promise. Hazel watched this feared mafia boss become just a desperate father, and something in her chest loosened. Whatever Ron Sampson did for a living, however dangerous he might be to his enemies, right now he was just a man who loved his child and couldn't protect him from an invisible enemy. "Mr. Sampson," Hazel said quietly, "I need to show you something." She'd kept it, the tiny fragment that had come away on her finger when Andrew screamed, barely larger than a grain of rice, metallic, with what looked like microscopic circuitry visible under the bathroom's bright lights. Ron took it from her palm, his expression cycling through confusion, understanding, and then cold rage that made Hazel instinctively pull Andrew closer. "How long have you been here?" Ron asked, his voice dangerously soft. 3 days. And you're the first person to notice this. It wasn't a question, but Hazel answered anyway. The previous caregivers probably didn't wash his hair. Andrew told me he usually does it himself because touching his head hurts too much. But you insisted. He's a child. Children need help with thorough washing. Hazel straightened her spine. And I have a daughter with medical issues. I'm used to noticing things doctors miss. For the first time, something like respect flickered in Ron's eyes. "What's your daughter's name?" "Emma. She's 7. Chronic illness requiring expensive treatments." Hazel met his gaze directly. "That's why I took this job, Mr. Sampson. The money. I was desperate. But I wouldn't have stayed if I didn't care about Andrew." "I believe you." Ron stood as Dr. Chris Cox hurried into the bathroom, medical bag in hand, looking disheveled and worried. "Ron, what's the emergency?" Then Chris saw Andrew, pale, trembling, exhausted, and his expression shifted to professional focus. "What happened?" "Hazel," Ron said, gesturing for her to explain. She did, showing Chris the tiny metallic fragment, describing the perfect circular bruises, explaining Andrew's reaction to even gentle touch. Chris examined the fragment under a portable microscope, his face growing increasingly grave. "Ron, this is surveillance technology, miniaturized, military grade, and if there are 8 of these—" "Scan him," Ron commanded. "All of it. I want to know exactly what's in my son's head." 40 minutes later, they stood in Ron's private medical facility, a fully equipped clinic hidden in the estate's basement, complete with MRI machine, surgical suite, and enough medical technology to run a small hospital. Andrew lay sedated on the examination table, finally free from pain for the first time in who knew how long. Hazel sat beside him, holding his hand, while Ron and Dr. Cox studied the scan results on multiple monitors. The images made Hazel's stomach turn. 8 distinct objects, each about the size of a small pill, embedded strategically across Andrew's skull just beneath the skin. The scans showed intricate internal structure, circuits, tiny batteries, what looked like miniature cameras or sensors. "Sweet Jesus," Chris breathed. "These are neural interface devices, micro-surveillance implants." "In English, doctor," Ron said coldly, "someone surgically implanted surveillance equipment in Andrew's skull." Chris pointed to different implants on the scan. "These 2 near his temples are cameras. They record everything he sees. These near his ears are microphones, everything he hears. This one at the back is a GPS tracker, and these," he indicated 4 implants arranged around Andrew's crown, "are neural pain inducers." The room went dead silent. "Pain inducers?" Hazel's voice shook. "They send electrical signals directly to pain receptors in the scalp and upper brain. Triggered remotely, probably. Used for—" Chris swallowed hard, for punishment or control, to keep him compliant, to ensure he didn't tell anyone about the implants. Imagine discovering that a child's suffering was deliberately inflicted, that someone chose to hurt him day after day as part of a plan. What would you do? How long? Ron's voice could have frozen hellfire. Based on the tissue integration around the implants, 6 to 8 months. Ron turned to Vincent, who had been standing silent by the door. 8 months ago. What happened 8 months ago? Vincent's face went white. The school field trip. Andrew's class went to the science museum. There was an accident. A display case collapsed, hit Andrew's head. We took him to the hospital. They did scans, kept him overnight for observation. It wasn't an accident, Ron interrupted, his voice deadly calm. It was staged. They staged an accident so they could implant these devices during the emergency medical care. He looked at Chris. Can you remove them? 4 of them, yes. But these 4 with the pain inducers, Chris's expression was grim. They're booby-trapped, Ron. See these secondary circuits? If someone tries to remove them without the proper neutralization sequence, they'll trigger. Best case, Andrew experiences agony we can't imagine. Worst case, brain damage or death. Then find out how to neutralize them. That requires knowing who made them, what protocols they're using. Then we find out who did this. Ron's eyes blazed with cold fury. Vincent, review every second of security footage from the past 8 months. I want to know who had access to Andrew, who touched his head, who showed any interest in these goddamn implants. Someone has been maintaining them, checking them, ensuring they kept working. Boss, that's hundreds of hours. Then hire more people. I don't care what it costs. Ron's control finally cracked. Someone turned my son into a walking surveillance device. Someone has been watching everything we do, hearing every conversation, tracking every movement through a child. Find them, Vincent. And when you do, his voice dropped to something absolutely terrifying. Bring them to me alive. Hazel stayed with Andrew as he slept, watching the monitors that showed his vital signs alongside the horrifying images of devices embedded in his skull. She thought about Emma, about her own daughter's suffering, about the desperation that had brought her to this mansion. She'd expected danger working for a mafia boss. She hadn't expected this, a conspiracy that used a child as a weapon, that deliberately tortured him to maintain operational security. You should go home, Ron said, appearing beside her. He'd changed from his wet clothes into dark jeans and a t-shirt that made him look more human, less like the criminal kingpin he was. Get some rest. This isn't your problem. With respect, Mr. Sampson. Yes, it is. Hazel met his gaze steadily. I found those implants, which means whoever put them there now knows they've been discovered. And if they realize I'm the one who found them, you think they'll come after you. I think they'll eliminate anyone who threatens their surveillance operation. That includes me, Andrew, probably Dr. Cox, and anyone else who knows. She squeezed Andrew's hand gently. So running home doesn't make me safer. It just makes me an isolated target. Ron studied her for a long moment. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm a mother, Hazel said simply. We do what's necessary to protect children, even ones that aren't ours. Something shifted in Ron's expression, respect, gratitude, and something that might have been recognition of a kindred spirit. Your daughter, Emma. What does she need? Ongoing treatments for a metabolic disorder, very expensive, not covered by insurance. Hazel's throat tightened. That's why I took this job, even though Sister Grace was vague about the details. I knew it would be dangerous. I just didn't know how dangerous. Sister Grace recommended you? She runs the charity ward at St. Catherine's Hospital, where Emma receives treatment. Hazel paused. Wait, how did Sister Grace know about this position? Ron's expression darkened. I'll find out, but first… He pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Ron Sampson. I need you to ensure a patient named Emma Dennis at St. Catherine's receives every treatment she needs, indefinitely. All costs covered through my foundation. He listened briefly. I don't care about the amount. Just do it. He ended the call and looked at Hazel. Your daughter's medical care is handled. Permanently. Tears burned Hazel's eyes. Mr. Sampson, you saved my son, or at least started the process of saving him. Ron's voice was rough. This is the least I can do. And, Hazel? He used her first name deliberately. You're right. You're safer here with my security than anywhere else. So I'm asking, will you stay? Help us protect Andrew through whatever comes next. Hazel looked at the child sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, at the scans showing devices that had tortured him, at the father who would clearly burn the world down to save his son. Yes, she said. I'll stay. Vincent found it in hour 73 of security review. Hazel was reading to Andrew, finally awake and mostly recovered from his sedation. When Ron and Vincent burst into the room, the security chief's face pale with fury and self-recrimination. Boss, you need to see this. Vincent pulled up footage on his tablet. I should have caught this months ago. I'm sorry. Just show me, Ron cut him off. The video showed Andrew's tutoring sessions with Theodore Brennan, a pleasant-faced man in his late 30s whom Hazel had met briefly. Theodore had been Andrew's private tutor for exactly 8 months, hired with impeccable references right after the accident. Watch his hands, Vincent said quietly. In every tutoring session, at least a dozen times per hour, Theodore reached out to touch Andrew's hair. Sometimes it looked like affection, ruffling the boy's hair after a correct answer. Sometimes it looked like adjustment, smoothing down a cowlick. Always his fingers lingered for just a moment longer than natural on the precise locations where the implants were embedded. He's checking them, Dr. Cox said, appearing behind them. Ensuring they're functioning, probably making micro-adjustments. Those devices require regular maintenance, battery checks, calibration, cleaning the sensor arrays. Where is Theodore now? Ron's voice was absolutely calm, which Hazel had learned meant he was at his most dangerous. In the estate library, preparing today's lesson, Vincent replied. Good. Ron turned to Hazel. Take Andrew to the secure wing. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Dr. Cox. What are you going to do? Hazel asked, though she already knew what I do best. Ron's smile was terrifying. I'm going to have a conversation with Andrew's tutor. 20 minutes later, Ron walked into the library where Theodore sat arranging textbooks, looking exactly like the gentle, educated tutor who'd been teaching his son for 8 months. Mr. Sampson! Theodore stood quickly, surprise evident. I wasn't expecting… Is Andrew all right? I heard he was ill last night. Andrew is fine. Ron settled into the chair across from Theodore's teaching desk. Actually, that's not quite true. Andrew has been suffering for 8 months. Daily headaches that leave him screaming. You've witnessed them, haven't you, Theodore? Yes, of course. Terrible thing. Theodore's concern looked genuine. The doctors couldn't find any cause. But we found a cause. Ron's eyes never left Theodore's face. Want to guess what it was? A flicker, just a tiny micro-expression, gone in a heartbeat, crossed Theodore's face. Fear? Calculation? Both? I have no idea what you mean. 8 micro-surveillance implants, embedded in my son's skull, causing him deliberate, agonizing pain whenever someone wanted to ensure his compliance. Ron leaned forward slightly. Someone who had regular access to him. Someone who could maintain the devices, check their functionality, ensure they kept working properly. Theodore's hand drifted toward his jacket pocket, a reflexive movement quickly aborted. But Ron saw it. More importantly, Vincent saw it from his position by the door, and moved with predatory speed. "Don't!" Vincent had his weapon out, pointed at Theodore with the steady grip of someone who'd done this many times. "Hands on the desk." "Now!" Theodore complied, but his pleasant mask had cracked. "You can't prove anything. I'm just a tutor who touches my son's hair an average of 14 times per hour." Ron pulled out Vincent's tablet, playing the security footage. Always in the exact locations where the implants are embedded. Interesting coincidence, don't you think? "Mr. Sampson, I can explain." "Don't bother lying. We pulled your real background. Theodore Brennan doesn't exist. He's a cover identity created 8 months ago. Your real name is Simon Vickers, former military intelligence, currently working for a private contractor called the Covenant." Theodore, Simon, went absolutely still. The Covenant specializes in industrial espionage, corporate intelligence gathering, and apparently using children as unwitting surveillance devices. Ron's voice dropped to something deadly. "You staged the accident that got Andrew hospitalized. You arranged for your people to implant those devices during his emergency medical care. You got yourself hired as his tutor to maintain the surveillance operation. And you've been torturing my son for 8 months to keep him terrified and compliant." "It wasn't personal," Simon said quietly, all pretense abandoned. "It was just an operation. Gather intelligence on your organization, map your connections, identify vulnerabilities, using my child as a camera, a microphone, a GPS tracker." Ron stood slowly, making him suffer every single day to maintain operational security. "You call that not personal?" Simon's hand shot to his jacket pocket, pulling out what looked like a small remote. "One button, Mr. Sampson. One button and those neural pain inducers activate at maximum intensity. Andrew will experience agony you can't imagine. Might kill him. Might just scramble his brain permanently. Want to take that risk?" Vincent's weapon shifted, but Ron held up a hand, stopping him. "You're bluffing," Ron said calmly. "Am I?" Simon's finger hovered over the button. "The devices are still active. I can trigger them remotely. Let me walk out of here, and Andrew lives. Try to stop me." "You're bluffing," Ron repeated, "because you need those implants intact. Your superiors at the Covenant want to know how we discovered them, how much we know, what we're planning. Dead, Andrew is worthless to you. So that's not a kill switch, Simon. It's a garage door opener or a TV remote or some other harmless device you're hoping I'm too stupid to call your bluff on." Simon's eyes widened fractionally. Confirmation. Ron moved with shocking speed for a man his size, crossing the distance and wrenching the remote from Simon's hand before the tutor could react. He examined it briefly, then smiled, a terrible expression. "Garage door opener. I was right." Ron tossed it to Vincent. "Secure him. I want to know everything about the Covenant, locations, personnel, protocols, how to safely remove the remaining implants." His eyes bored into Simon. "And you're going to tell me, because your only other option is so much worse than anything your employers might do to you." Simon was dragged away, screaming threats and promises that Andrew would never be free, that the Covenant had contingencies, that Ron couldn't protect his son from them. But Ron just stood in the library, looking at the space where his son's tutor, his betrayer, had sat for 8 months, and felt the cold certainty that this was just the beginning. Hazel watched Andrew sleep that evening, the boy finally at peace after Dr. Cox had given him medication that blocked the pain signals. The 4 implants they could safely remove would be extracted tomorrow. The other 4, the booby-trapped ones, would require more time, more information from Simon's interrogation. "He looks peaceful," Ron said, appearing in the doorway. "He is, for now." Hazel glanced at the Mafia boss. "But you're worried about what comes next. The Covenant knows we've discovered their surveillance operation. They'll have contingencies, probably already activated." Ron moved to stand beside Andrew's bed. "Simon was right about one thing. I can't protect Andrew from an enemy I can't see. Not yet. But you're going to try. I'm going to do more than try." Ron's voice hardened. "I'm going to find every person involved in this operation. Every person who knew my son was being used and tortured. Every person who profited from his suffering. And I'm going to make them wish they'd never heard the name Samson." It should have terrified Hazel, this glimpse of the ruthless criminal Ron Samson was. Instead, she just felt profound relief that this particular ruthless criminal was on their side. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Keep Andrew safe. Keep him calm. Help him through the surgeries." Ron paused. "And if something happens to me in the next few days, there's a secure phone in the nightstand. Speed dial 1 connects you to Dr. Cox. Speed dial 2 connects you to my lawyer. She has instructions for Andrew's care, including permanent guardianship arrangements if necessary. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that." "No," Hazel admitted. "But I know you're too stubborn to die before making sure Andrew is safe. So you'll survive whatever comes next, because the alternative is unacceptable." Ron smiled, genuine, warm, the first real smile Hazel had seen from him. "You sound like my wife. Before she—" He trailed off, old pain flickering across his face. "How did she die?" Hazel asked gently. "Car accident. 3 years ago, drunk driver ran a red light." Ron's hands clenched. "Ironic, isn't it? I survived decades in the Mafia, countless enemies, multiple wars, and she dies because some idiot couldn't call a cab. I'm sorry." "So am I." Ron looked at his sleeping son. Andrew was 8. He blamed himself for a while, thought if he'd been in the car with her it wouldn't have happened. Nightmares. Therapy. We got through it. And now, his voice turned bitter. Now he gets to be traumatized all over again because I made enemies who were willing to torture a child to get to me. "This isn't your fault," Hazel said firmly. "The people who did this, they're the monsters, not you." "I'm not exactly innocent, Hazel." "No, but you're a father who loves his son. That counts for a lot." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Andrew sleep, both knowing that tomorrow would bring surgery, interrogations, and whatever countermoves the Covenant had planned. War was coming, and they would face it together. The first surgery began at dawn. Dr. Cox had assembled a team, all people Ron trusted absolutely, all vetted by Vincent's security, all aware that one mistake could kill a child or alert the Covenant that they were losing their surveillance access. "These 4 implants are relatively straightforward," Chris explained, showing them 3D scans, the cameras near his temples and the microphones near his ears. No booby traps, no complex removal protocols. Standard micro-surgical techniques should work. "Should?" Ron's voice was tight. Will, Chris corrected. They will work. I've done more complex extractions. Andrew will be fine. Hazel held Andrew's hand as the anesthesia took effect, the boy looking up at her with trust that made her chest ache. You'll be here when I wake up? He asked, his voice already slurring. Right here, I promise. And Dad? Your father will be here too. Hazel glanced at Ron, who nodded firmly. We're not going anywhere. Andrew's eyes fluttered closed, and Hazel stepped back to let the surgical team work. Ron led her to an observation room where they could watch through a window while staying out of the way. I should be out there, Ron said, his hands clenching and unclenching, doing something, not standing here useless. You're not useless. You're being a father who trusts his son's doctor. Hazel touched his arm gently. Let Dr. Cox do what he does best. You focus on what you do best, protecting us from whatever the Covenant does next. How do you trust someone else to save the person you love most? How do you stand by and do nothing when every instinct screams to act? The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching Chris make microscopic incisions, carefully extract devices smaller than pills, photograph and document each implant for analysis. 4 hours of monitoring Andrew's vitals, ensuring the anesthesia held, that nothing went wrong. 4 hours of Ron pacing like a caged predator while Hazel sat perfectly still, the way she'd learned to during Emma's many procedures, conserving energy, staying calm, being ready to move the instant she was needed. When Chris finally emerged, holding 4 tiny devices in a specialized container, both Ron and Hazel lunged forward. He's fine, Chris said immediately. Surgery went perfectly. All 4 devices extracted without complications. Andrew's being moved to recovery now. And the surveillance? Ron asked. Are they still transmitting? Not anymore. I've placed them in a Faraday cage, blocks all signals. As far as the Covenant knows, these 4 devices just went offline simultaneously. Chris's expression turned grim, which means they're going to know something's wrong. Probably already know. As if on cue, Vincent burst through the door, weapon drawn, his expression urgent. Boss, we've got movement. 3 vehicles approaching the estate, heavy weapons visible. They're not trying to hide. Ron's face went absolutely cold. How long until they reach the gates? 5 minutes, maybe less. Get Andrew to the secure bunker. Hazel, you go with him. Dr. Cox, I need you there too in case Andrew needs medical attention. Ron was already moving, pulling a weapon from a concealed holster. Vincent, activate all defensive protocols. I want those bastards stopped before they get within 100 yards of my son. Boss, there's more. Vincent's voice was strained. One of the vehicles is broadcasting on our secure frequency. They want to talk to you. Let them talk. Ron's smile was terrifying. While our defense systems tear them apart. The bunker was exactly what it sounded like. A reinforced concrete room 20 feet underground, accessed through a hidden elevator in Ron's private office. Hazel found herself in a space equipped with communications equipment, enough supplies for a week-long siege, and disturbingly, a small arsenal of weapons. Andrew woke slowly, groggy from anesthesia, confused about why they were underground. What's happening? He asked, his voice small and frightened. Some bad people are trying to cause trouble, Hazel said calmly, channeling every ounce of maternal reassurance she possessed. Your father is handling it. We're just staying safe down here until he's done. Because of the things in my head? Yes, sweetheart. Andrew's face crumpled. This is my fault. If I'd told someone, if I'd been braver. Stop. Hazel gripped his shoulders firmly. This is not your fault. You're a child. These were adults who deliberately hurt you, who put you in an impossible situation, who tortured you to keep you quiet. None of that is your responsibility. Do you understand me? Above them, they heard distant sounds, gunfire, explosions. The muted chaos of combat filtered through 20 feet of concrete. Your father is protecting you, Hazel continued. Dr. Cox is here to keep you healthy. And I'm here because I care about you, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you ever again. That's what adults are supposed to do, protect children. We failed you for 8 months. We're not failing you now. Andrew threw his arms around her, crying into her shoulder, and Hazel held him while the world above them descended into violence. The battle lasted 37 minutes. When the secure phone finally rang, Hazel answered with shaking hands. Hello? It's done. Ron's voice was rough, exhausted. They're dead or captured. The estate is secure. Are you hurt? Nothing serious. I'm coming down. 5 minutes later, Ron emerged from the elevator, his suit jacket torn, blood on his knuckles. Whether his or someone else's, Hazel couldn't tell. But he was alive, moving steadily, and when Andrew saw him, the boy launched himself at his father. Dad! Ron caught him, holding tight, his face buried in Andrew's hair. I'm here, son. I'm here. You're safe. They came because of me, Andrew whispered. They came because they're cowards who prey on children. Ron pulled back to look at his son directly. But they failed, Andrew. They failed because you're stronger than they thought. Because Hazel found those devices. Because we're fighting back. And before this is over, every single person involved in what they did to you is going to pay. Chris cleared his throat gently. Ron, we need to discuss the remaining implants. The Covenant knows we've removed 4 devices. They'll assume we're going after the rest, which means they'll either try to activate the pain inducers remotely, or they'll try to trigger the booby traps to prevent us from getting intel from the devices, Ron finished. How do we stop that? We need the neutralization codes. Or the person who designed the implants. Chris paused. Simon's interrogation. Has he given you anything useful? He will, Ron said with absolute certainty. Trust me, he will. Simon Vickers sat in a windowless room in Ron's basement, zip-tied to a chair that was bolted to the floor. He'd been there for 6 hours, long enough to be exhausted, not long enough to break. Yet. Ron entered alone, which probably terrified Simon more than if he'd brought Vincent and his intimidating weapons. The attack failed, Ron said conversationally, settling into a chair across from Simon. 12 of your colleagues dead, 4 captured. Your Covenant is down considerable personnel, and they failed to retrieve the devices or eliminate any witnesses. Simon said nothing. You know what's interesting? Ron continued. Andrew's sleeping upstairs. Peacefully. 4 of those devices gone from his head. 4 more to go. And you're going to tell me how to safely remove them. I won't. You will. Because you're a professional, Simon. You know how this works. You've calculated the odds, assessed your situation, and realized that your organization has written you off. You failed your mission. You're compromised. They're not coming to rescue you. The Covenant doesn't abandon. The Covenant just sent 12 men to die rather than try to negotiate your release, Ron interrupted. That tells me everything about how expendable you are to them. So here's what happens next. You give me the neutralization codes for those implants. You tell me everything about the Covenant. Headquarters locations, personnel, protocols. And in exchange, I let you disappear. New identity, money, a chance to start over somewhere your former employers can't find you. Simon stared at Ron for a long moment, calculation visible in his eyes. And if I refuse? Then I stop being reasonable. Ron's voice went absolutely cold. I'm a patient man, Simon. But that's my son upstairs, still suffering because of what you did. My patience has limits, and you really, really don't want to find out what I'm like when those limits are reached. The threat hung in the air, not dramatic, not theatrical, just the absolute certainty that Ron Sampson would do whatever was necessary to protect his child. Simon broke. The codes are encrypted. Even if I give them to you, you can't access them without the Covenant's secure network. Then give me access to the network. It requires biometric authentication, retinal scan, fingerprint, voice recognition, multi-factor, impossible to fake. So we bring you to a terminal with access. Ron pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. Where's the nearest one? Simon hesitated, then, the Covenant maintains a black site medical facility in the industrial district. Warehouse 47B on Pier Street. That's where the surgeon who designed Andrew's implants works, Dr. Viktor Kuznetsov. Ron's eyes gleamed. The man who created these devices can remove them safely. In theory, but the facility is heavily guarded. You'll never get past. I've gotten past worse. Ron stood. You're coming with us, Simon. You're going to get us into that facility, introduce us to Dr. Kuznetsov, and help us extract those implants from my son's head. If you cooperate, you get your new identity and freedom. If you don't, he didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. 4 hours later, they assembled for what Ron called the extraction operation, terminology that applied both to removing implants and raiding an enemy facility. Hazel had insisted on coming, despite Ron's objections. Andrew trusts me, she'd said firmly. If you're bringing him into a dangerous situation, he needs someone familiar there to keep him calm. They'd sedated Andrew lightly, enough to keep him quiet and reduce stress, not enough to impair his ability to follow instructions if they needed to move quickly. Vincent had assembled a team of 12 men, all people who'd worked for Ron for years, all absolutely loyal, all heavily armed and prepared for a combat operation. And Simon, hands zip-tied in front of him, sat in the lead vehicle with Ron, Hazel, and Andrew, looking like he deeply regretted every decision that had brought him to this moment. The facility has 3 entrances, Simon explained as they approached the industrial district. Main entrance is guarded, minimum 4 men, cameras, reinforced doors. Service entrance on the east side is lighter security but requires keycard access. Loading dock on the south side is the weakest point, but it's exposed. We're not sneaking in, Ron said. We're walking through the front door. Because you're going to tell them you've brought me in for a meeting with Dr. Kuznetsov. Simon's eyes widened. They'll never believe. They'll believe you captured me. That I made a deal, access to Kuznetsov, to save my son in exchange for information about my organization. Ron's smile was cold. Tell them I'm desperate, broken, willing to trade anything to save Andrew. They'll believe that because it's true. The convoy stopped 3 blocks from the warehouse. Ron's team fanned out, moving to predetermined positions. Vincent would coordinate the assault from outside, ready to breach if things went wrong inside. Ron, Hazel, Andrew, and Simon approached the main entrance on foot. 2 guards stood outside, weapons visible, but not raised. Yet. They watched the approaching group with suspicion that turned to shock when they recognized Simon. Vickers? What the hell? You're supposed to be deep cover at the Sampson estate. Plan changed, Simon said, his voice carrying just the right amount of exhaustion and triumph. I've got Ron Sampson. He wants to make a deal. Needs to see Kuznetsov urgently. The guard's attention fixed on Ron, specifically on the very real desperation visible in his face as he held Andrew protectively. Search them, the lead guard commanded. They found the weapons Ron was carrying, intentionally placed where they'd be discovered easily, making the subsequent "you're clear" seem more credible. They didn't find the knife in Hazel's boot, or the small ceramic blade hidden in Andrew's shoe, or the fact that Simon's zip ties were fake and would release with a specific twist. Dr. Kuznetsov is in the surgical suite, the guard said, gesturing inside. 3rd floor. You'll be escorted. They entered the warehouse, converted into a medical facility that looked disturbingly legitimate. Clean hallways, medical equipment, the chemical smell of sterilization. If Hazel hadn't known this was a black site operated by criminal intelligence contractors, she might have thought it was a normal private clinic. 2 more guards escorted them upstairs, leading them to a surgical suite where a man in his 50s worked at a computer, studying what looked like neural scan data. Dr. Kuznetsov, Simon said, I've brought you a patient. Viktor Kuznetsov turned, his eyes immediately fixing on Andrew with clinical interest. The Samson boy. I wondered when you'd figure out what I'd done. His accent was thick, Russian or Eastern European. The implants are giving you trouble, yes? Pain is getting worse? You're going to remove them, Ron said flatly. Am I? Victor smiled. And why would I do that? Because the alternative is me ripping them out with my bare hands, which will probably kill Andrew, but will definitely make your last few hours extremely unpleasant before I kill you. Ron's voice was absolutely calm. Or you can remove them safely, prove your brilliance as a surgeon, and walk away from this alive. Victor studied Ron for a long moment, then turned to Andrew. Come here, boy. Let me see what condition the implants are in. Andrew looked at Hazel, who nodded encouragingly. The boy approached the surgeon slowly, every line of his body radiating fear. Victor's hands were surprisingly gentle as he examined Andrew's scalp, his fingers probing the sites of the remaining 4 implants. 4 still active. The neural pain inducers, very delicate work, removing these. 1 mistake, and he made a casual gesture suggesting brain damage. Then don't make mistakes, Ron said. The price for my services, your life, Ron interrupted. That's the price. You do this successfully. You live. You refuse, or you hurt my son, you die. Simple transaction. Victor's smile faded. He was calculating, Hazel realized, weighing whether Ron was serious, whether escape was possible, whether cooperation or resistance was the better survival strategy. Very well, Victor said finally. I'll remove the implants, but it will take time. 3, perhaps 4 hours. The procedure is complex, the risks are high, and I require complete concentration. You'll have it, Ron gestured to Simon. Secure the facility. I want no interruptions. Simon moved with surprising speed, his fake zip ties releasing exactly as planned. Within seconds, he had one guard's weapon and was pointing it at the other. Sorry, Simon said to his former colleagues. New employer, better terms. The surgery began at midnight. Andrew lay on the surgical table, sedated but not fully unconscious. Victor insisted he needed the boy responsive for neural testing during the extraction. Hazel stood at Andrew's side, holding his hand, her other hand resting on the ceramic knife in her boot. She didn't trust Victor, not even slightly. The neural pain inducers are the most sophisticated devices I've ever designed," Victor explained, his tone carrying disturbing pride. "Targeted electrical stimulation of cranial nerves, powered by micro-batteries that last 5 years, capable of producing agony without permanent damage. Beautiful work, really." "Get them out of my son," Ron said coldly. "Patience." Victor made the first incision, microscopic and precise. "The devices are embedded near major nerve clusters. Too deep, I sever something important. Too shallow, I don't get clean extraction. Either way, the boy suffers." Hazel watched Victor's hands move with undeniable skill, extracting the first implant after 47 minutes of painstaking surgery. The device, when finally removed, looked impossibly small to have caused such suffering. "One down," Victor announced. 3 to go." The second implant took longer. 93 minutes of microsurgery, with Andrew whimpering occasionally despite the anesthesia. Each sound made Ron's hands clench, made Hazel's grip on her hidden knife tighten. But Victor continued working with what seemed like genuine focus on saving rather than harming. "But Padre," Hazel asked quietly during a pause while Victor checked Andrew's neural responses. "Why design something so cruel? Why use a child?" Victor didn't look up from his instruments. "Because I'm very good at what I do. And the Covenant pays very well. Morality is a luxury for people who aren't trying to survive." "You're trying to survive now," Ron observed. "Yes, which is why I'm removing these rather than triggering them to fry his brain." Victor resumed working on the third implant. "Don't mistake pragmatism for redemption, Mr. Sampson. I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm just choosing a different employer." At least he was honest about being a monster. The third implant came out at hour 4. Andrew was exhausted, pale, his small body trembling with stress and lingering pain. Hazel murmured reassurances, wiped sweat from his forehead, and prayed to whatever deity might be listening that this would end soon. "Last one," Victor said. "This is the most difficult. It's embedded near the brainstem, closer to critical structures than the others. If I slip, the boy could be paralyzed or dead." "Then don't slip," Ron said. Victor's hands moved with microscopic precision, his focus absolute. Hazel watched out every movement, looking for any sign of sabotage, any indication that Victor was planning betrayal. But he worked with what seemed like genuine commitment to success. Until the alarms started blaring. "What the hell?" Ron spun toward the door. "They're breaching the facility," Vincent's voice crackled through Ron's radio. "Covenant reinforcements. They must have been monitoring the surgical suite remotely. Boss, you need to get out now." "We're in the middle of surgery," Ron snapped. "I don't care." "We can't hold them. There's too many." Gunfire erupted somewhere below them, the sound of combat echoing through the building. "How long?" Ron demanded, turning to Victor. 10 minutes, maybe 15. If I rush, I kill him." Victor's hands never stopped moving, his concentration unbroken despite the chaos. "Your choice, Mr. Sampson. Run now, or stay and hope I finish before they reach us." Ron looked at Andrew, his son, still on the table, the final device partially extracted. "We stay," he decided. "Vincent, hold them as long as you can." "Boss, that's an order." The next 12 minutes were the longest of Hazel's life. Gunfire grew closer. Explosions shook the building. She heard Vincent's team fighting desperately, buying them time with their lives. Victor worked with inhuman focus, his hands steady despite the building falling apart around them. The fourth implant was more embedded than the others, wrapped around nerve clusters that couldn't be damaged without catastrophic consequences. "Almost," Victor muttered. "Almost." The surgical suite door burst open. Not Vincent's team. Covenant soldiers, weapons raised, faces covered with tactical gear. Ron moved with shocking speed, drawing the weapon he'd concealed and firing before the soldiers could acquire targets. 2 went down immediately. The third got a shot off, the bullet catching Ron in the shoulder, spinning him around, but not dropping him. Hazel grabbed her ceramic knife, putting herself between the remaining soldier and Andrew. Simon appeared from nowhere, tackling the soldier, his movements showing the training that made him valuable to intelligence agencies. They fought hand to hand, brutal and efficient, until Simon emerged victorious with the soldier's weapon. "Got it!" Victor yanked the final implant free, holding it up triumphantly. "Andrew, can you walk?" Hazel demanded. The boy nodded weakly. "Then we're leaving." "Now." Ron clutched his bleeding shoulder but remained standing, his weapon still trained on the door. They fled through corridors, filling with smoke, past bodies of guards and Ron's security forces who'd sacrificed themselves to buy time. Vincent met them at the service exit, bleeding from a leg wound but mobile. "Vehicles are ready! Move!" They piled into armored SUVs, tires screaming as they fled the burning facility. Behind them, the Covenant warehouse was fully engulfed, their surgical suite, their records, their evidence of Andrew's implants, all being consumed by fire. In the back seat, Hazel held Andrew while Dr. Cox, who'd been waiting in the vehicle, examined his head with a portable scanner. "All 4 devices are out," Chris confirmed. "No implants remaining. He's clean." Andrew started crying, not from pain but from overwhelming relief. "It's over," he whispered. "Really over?" "Really over," Hazel assured him. "You're free, sweetheart." Ron, bleeding but smiling through pain, reached back to squeeze his son's hand. "You're free, Andrew, and I promise you no one will ever do something like this to you again." The war lasted 2 weeks. Ron launched simultaneous strikes against 3 Covenant facilities, using intelligence extracted from Simon and captured guards. His forces hit their data centers, weapons depots, and administrative headquarters with military precision. Hazel watched from the safety of the seaside safehouse where Ron had moved them, a fortified estate far from the city, isolated and secure. Andrew was healing, the surgical sites on his scalp closing cleanly, the daily headaches finally, blessedly gone. 12 Covenant operatives eliminated, Vincent reported during one of his daily briefings. 7 captured, currently in interrogation. We've identified 23 more targets, but they've gone underground. "Find them," Ron commanded, his shoulder bandaged but healing. "Every single person who knew about what they did to Andrew. I want them found." "Boss, some of these people are outside our normal territory, outside our jurisdiction even." "I don't care about jurisdiction," Ron interrupted coldly. "They tortured my son. They made him suffer for 8 months. There is no place on Earth safe enough, no legal protection strong enough to save them from consequences. When you've been violated in the most personal way possible, when your child has been used as a weapon against you, what does justice require? What does vengeance demand?" 2 days later, they got Julian Cross. The Covenant's leader had been hiding in a compound 2 states away, protected by layers of security and legal shields. Ron's forces breached it anyway, capturing Julian and the last of his high-level operatives. "He's here," Vincent announced, leading a bound and bloodied Julian into the safe house's secure room. Alive, as requested. Ron stood, his expression absolutely neutral. Leave us. Boss, I said leave. Vincent and his team withdrew, leaving Ron alone with the man who'd orchestrated Andrew's nightmare. Hazel watched from the observation room, Andrew beside her. The boy had insisted on seeing the man responsible for his suffering. Mr. Sampson, Julian said, his cultured voice barely showing strain despite obvious injuries. I suppose negotiations are off the table. You turned my son into a surveillance device, Ron said quietly. You made him suffer daily agony to keep him compliant. You stole 8 months of his childhood. What exactly do you think we have to negotiate about? Information. I can give you names, locations, operations that might threaten you in the future. I don't need your information. Simon gave me everything already. Viktor Kuznetsov confirmed it. Your organization is dismantled, your people are dead or captured, your facilities are burned. Ron leaned forward. So tell me, Julian, was it worth it? Did you get enough intelligence to justify what you did to an innocent child? Julian's composure finally cracked. He was a strategic asset, a way to gather intel without any risk of detection. He was 11 years old, Ron roared, his control finally breaking. He was a child, and you made him a weapon. You tortured him. For what? For money? For intelligence that didn't even help you because here you are, beaten, captured, finished? In the observation room, Andrew's hands clenched. Hazel pulled him close, letting him process this confrontation between his father and his tormentor. I did what was necessary, Julian said, trying to reclaim dignity. In our business, sentiment is weakness. Your son was an opportunity. He never finished the sentence. Ron moved with shocking speed, and what happened next made Hazel turn Andrew away, shielding him from the violence. When she looked back, Julian Cross was unconscious on the floor, Ron standing over him with cold satisfaction. Take him to the authorities, Ron said to Vincent, who'd rushed back in at the sounds of conflict. Let him face trial for his crimes. I want the world to know what the Covenant did. Boss, if he talks about you, I don't care. Ron's voice was firm. Let him talk. Let everyone know exactly why I destroyed his organization. Let them know what happens to people who hurt my son. The trial became international news. Julian Cross and 17 captured Covenant operatives faced charges ranging from conspiracy to commit assault, to illegal surveillance, to crimes against a minor. The medical evidence was damning. 8 devices removed from an 11-year-old child. Documented torture. Months of deliberate suffering. The media called it the most horrifying case of espionage abuse in modern history. Ron testified, his testimony devastating in its controlled fury. Dr. Cox provided medical evidence. Even Viktor Kuznetsov testified, in exchange for immunity, describing in technical detail how the implants were designed to cause maximum suffering while leaving no external evidence. And Andrew testified. Hazel sat in the courtroom beside Ron, watching this brave child describe 8 months of daily agony, of not understanding why he hurt, of being too terrified to tell anyone because a seemingly kind tutor had convinced him that speaking out would make the pain worse. I thought I was dying, Andrew told the jury, his voice small but clear. Every day. I thought maybe today would be the day my head just exploded from the pain, and no one could tell me what was wrong. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Julian Cross received 35 years without parole. His operatives received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. The Covenant was officially dismantled, its assets seized, its remaining members scattered or arrested. Justice, such as it was, had been served. 6 months after the final implant was removed, Hazel found Andrew on the beach, behind their new home, a sprawling estate Ron had purchased specifically because it was far from the city, isolated, and had a stretch of private beach where Andrew could play safely. The boy was building a sandcastle, his hair grown long enough to hide the faint scars on his scalp. He looked healthy, happy, transformed from the suffering child she'd first met. "That's impressive architecture," Hazel observed, settling beside him in the sand. "Dr. Cox says building things is good therapy, helps rewire my brain after all the trauma." Andrew added another tower to his castle. "He's probably right. I like making things that aren't designed to hurt people." The reference to the implants was deliberate. Andrew was working through his trauma with therapists, slowly, carefully, but making genuine progress. "How's Emma?" Andrew asked. "Is she feeling better?" "Much better. The new treatments are working." Hazel smiled, grateful once again for Ron's intervention in her daughter's care. "She asked if you wanted to video chat later. Something about showing you her new telescope." "Definitely. She's way better at astronomy than me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching waves roll in, the sun warm on their faces. A year ago, this peaceful moment would have been impossible. Andrew would have been suffering through another headache, terrified and isolated. "Hazel?" Andrew's voice was tentative. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you stay? After you found the implants, after everything got dangerous, you could have left. Dad would have paid you. You could have gone back to Emma. But you stayed." He looked at her directly. "Why?" Hazel considered the question carefully. "Because you needed someone to care about you for you. Not because of who your father is or what you could provide, because I'm a mother, and mothers protect children, all children, not just their own, and because—" She paused, finding the right words. "Because you reminded me that there are things worth risking everything for, worth fighting for." "Like love?" Andrew asked softly. "Exactly like love." Andrew leaned against her, and Hazel wrapped her arm around him. This boy she'd saved, and who'd somehow saved her right back, by reminding her that courage and compassion mattered more than safety or comfort. Ron appeared on the deck above them, no longer in expensive suits but in casual clothes that made him look almost normal. The shoulder wound had healed, leaving only a scar he wore without complaint. "Lunch is ready," he called down, "and Emma's calling in 15 minutes for that astronomy session." "Coming?" Andrew jumped up, grabbing Hazel's hand. "Race you to the house." They ran, laughing. Hazel intentionally letting Andrew win while Ron watched from above with an expression of profound gratitude. Later that evening, after Andrew was asleep, Ron found Hazel on the deck overlooking the ocean. "He's doing well," Ron observed, settling into the chair beside hers. "He is. The therapy's helping. Being somewhere safe, being able to just be a child. It's making all the difference." "Because of you." Ron's voice was quiet. "You found those implants. You insisted we investigate. You protected him through everything that followed. We wouldn't be here without you, Hazel." "We protected him together," Hazel corrected gently. "No, I protected him like a father protecting his child. You protected him like—" Ron stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "Like someone who genuinely cared about his well-being beyond obligation or duty." You risked your life for a child you barely knew because it was the right thing to do. So did you. I'm his father. That's different. Is it? Hazel turned to look at him directly. Love is love, Ron. Biological connection, moral obligation, or just human decency, they all lead to the same place. We both love Andrew. We both fought for him. The specific nature of that love might be different, but the commitment is the same. Ron was quiet for a long moment. Then, I've been meaning to discuss something with you. About the future. Hazel's heart skipped. Okay? Andrew needs stability, consistency. People he trusts who aren't going to disappear from his life. Ron's hands clenched on the chair arms. And we need someone who understands what we've been through. Who can help Andrew heal while also helping me be a better father. Ron, what are you asking? I'm asking if you'll stay. Permanently. Not as hired help, but as family. Andrew already thinks of you that way. He stopped, took a breath. I value what you've brought to our lives. Your courage, your compassion, your ability to see what needs to be done and do it despite fear. We need that. I need that. When someone offers you a place in their family, built on shared trauma and hard-won trust, do you accept the risk of permanence? Do you believe healing can be a foundation for something lasting? What about Emma? Hazel asked carefully. Emma comes too, obviously. We'll set up her room here, ensure she has access to the best medical care, schools, whatever she needs. She becomes part of this family, same as you. Ron met Hazel's eyes. I know this isn't conventional. I know we come with dangers and complications most families don't face. But if you're willing, if you can see a future here with us, I'm asking you to build that future together. Hazel thought about Emma, about stability and safety and medical care that would never be interrupted by money concerns. She thought about Andrew, this brave child who'd survived the unimaginable and was learning to laugh again. She thought about Ron, this complicated man who'd moved heaven and earth to save his son. She thought about family and what that word really meant. Yes, she said simply. We'll stay. We'll build that future together. Ron's smile was brilliant, genuine, the expression of a man who'd been carrying impossible weight and finally found someone willing to share the burden. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. The sound of children's laughter echoed across the beach. Hazel stood on the deck, watching Andrew, now 13, tall and healthy, teaching Emma how to fly a kite. Her daughter, now 9 and thriving after 2 years of uninterrupted quality medical care, shrieked with delight as the kite soared. They're good together, Ron observed, appearing beside Hazel with 2 cups of coffee. Andrew's been incredible with her. She adores him, keeps calling him her big brother. Well, that's technically accurate now. Ron's smile was warm. The adoption paperwork had been finalized 6 months ago. Hazel and Emma Dennis were now legally Hazel and Emma Sampson, part of Ron's family in all the ways that mattered. It had been unconventional from the start. But then again, nothing about their family had ever been conventional. Dr. Cox called, Ron said, settling into the chair beside Hazel's. Andrew's latest neurological scan came back perfect. No residual damage from the implants, no lingering effects. He's completely healed. Physically, Hazel corrected gently, the emotional healing is ongoing. But ongoing successfully. Ron watched his son with obvious pride. He's in therapy. He's processing the trauma. He's building a life that isn't defined by what happened to him. That's more than I hoped for 2 years ago. 2 years since that terrible discovery in the bath. 2 years since Hazel had felt metal beneath a child's skin and refused to ignore what she'd found. 2 years of surgery and warfare and trials, and finally, healing. "Have you heard from Simon?" Hazel asked. "Last month. He's in Australia, apparently. New identity, new life. Staying far away from anything related to intelligence work." Ron's expression was neutral. "He calls occasionally, checking in. I think he feels guilty." "He should. He was part of what hurt Andrew. But he also helped save him." Ron shrugged. "Complicated man. I'm glad he's someone else's problem now." Viktor Kuznetsov was in prison, serving 20 years for his role in designing the implants. Theodore Brennan, Simon Vickers, had testified against him and entered witness protection. Julian Cross would die in prison, his empire dismantled, his legacy being the man who tortured a child for profit. Justice imperfect, but real. "Mom! Dad!" Andrew's voice carried across the beach. "Emma got the kite stuck in a tree. We need help." "Coming!" Hazel and Ron called in unison, then laughed at their synchronized response. They walked down to the beach together, this family forged in crisis and sustained by choice. Andrew and Emma were arguing good-naturedly about whose fault the stuck kite was, their banter showing the comfortable relationship of siblings who genuinely liked each other. Ron retrieved the kite with minimal effort. Climbing trees was apparently a skill developed during his criminal years, while Hazel supervised the children's next attempt at proper kite flying. "Higher!" Emma shrieked. "Make it go higher!" "I'm trying," Andrew laughed. "Physics only works so fast." Hazel watched her children play, watched Ron join them in the surf, and felt profound gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them all together. The discovery that had started with something terrifying hidden in a child's hair had led them here, to this beach, this laughter, this peace. Andrew's headaches were gone. The implants were destroyed. The covenant was finished. The nightmares were fading, replaced gradually by dreams of normal things: school, friends, astronomy, family. They'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. That evening, as they gathered for dinner in the large kitchen that had become the heart of their home, Andrew raised his glass of juice in a toast. "To Hazel," he said, his voice carrying the confidence of a child who'd survived hell and found his way back. For being brave enough to notice what everyone else missed. For staying when it got dangerous. For, his voice caught slightly, for being the mom I needed when I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again. Hazel's eyes filled with tears. "Andrew." "To Hazel," Ron echoed, raising his own glass. "For saving my son, protecting our family, and reminding me that courage and compassion are just as powerful as any weapon." "To Mom," Emma added enthusiastically, not entirely understanding the emotional weight, but recognizing an important moment. They clinked glasses, this patchwork family built on trauma and trust, and Hazel felt something settle in her chest, the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Later, tucking Andrew into bed, Hazel noticed him touching his scalp absently, an old habit from when the implants caused pain. "Still hurt?" she asked gently. "No." Andrew dropped his hand quickly, embarrassed. "Just checking. Sometimes I forget they're really gone." "They are. Forever. You're safe now." I know. But sometimes, he paused, struggling with words. Sometimes, I'm scared it was all a dream. That I'll wake up and they'll still be there, and I'll still be hurting, and no one will believe me. Hazel sat on the edge of his bed, taking his hand. Andrew, look at me. He met her eyes. This is real. The implants are gone. The people who hurt you are in prison or dead. Your father and I are here, and we're not going anywhere. You're safe. You're loved, and you're building a life that's entirely yours. Not defined by what they did to you, but by who you choose to become. She squeezed his hand. Understand? Yeah. Andrew's smile was small but genuine. Thanks, Mom. The word, so natural now, so earned, made Hazel's heart swell. Get some sleep, sweetheart. Tomorrow we're taking Emma to the aquarium, remember? Can't wait. She's been talking about sharks for 3 days straight. Hazel kissed his forehead, right over one of the faint scars where an implant had been, reclaiming that space with love instead of violation. As she left his room, she heard Andrew's breathing even out into sleep, peaceful, undisturbed, free from the nightmares that had plagued him for so long. In the hallway, Ron waited, his expression soft. He called you Mom, he observed. He did. How do you feel about that? Hazel considered the question. Honored? Grateful? Terrified I'll mess it up somehow. Welcome to parenthood. Ron pulled her close, his arms warm and secure. But for what it's worth, you're doing an extraordinary job. Both kids are thriving because of you. Because of us, Hazel corrected. We're doing this together. Together, Ron agreed, and kissed her, a gesture that had evolved naturally over 2 years of partnership. From gratitude to friendship to something deeper that neither rushed, but both acknowledged. They stood in the hallway of their home, listening to the ocean outside and their children breathing peacefully in their rooms, and felt the profound satisfaction of having survived, healed, and built something worth protecting. You've just experienced the terrifying journey of a child turned into a surveillance weapon, a maid who risked everything to save him, and a father who went to war to protect his son. This was a story about noticing what others miss, about having the courage to act despite fear, and about finding family in the most unexpected places. What did you think? Would you have investigated those strange bruises, or assumed the doctors knew best? At what point did you realize the conspiracy went deeper than anyone expected? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next thriller about hidden dangers, unlikely heroes, and the power of refusing to look away from suffering. Remember, sometimes the most terrifying secrets are hidden in plain sight. And sometimes the most ordinary people become heroes simply by paying attention and refusing to ignore what they've found.